not a tool. This is not a tool that, let's see what I lost mine. This is not a tool that an individual uses on their own for doing an assessment. It takes a team. So that's why it kind of shows the picture there of the subject matter experts. So it provides a systematic, disciplined, and repeatable approach for evaluating organization's security posture. As I mentioned, it's a desktop tool, but they do have an enterprise tool, and it takes you a step-by-step evaluation through the industrial control systems and the IT network security practices. It also, users can evaluate their own cybersecurity stance by using their recognized government industry standards and recommendations. And I'll show you those in the demo. It's a Department of Homeland Security and the National Communications International Center that developed the CSET tool. That's basically if you're familiar with the US certs, that's where this came from. And the Idaho labs was very instrumental in developing the product, along with Department of Homeland Security. So how it works, it helps asset owners assess their information and operational system security practices. It does this by asking a series of detailed questions about the system components and the architecture, as well as operational policies and procedures for that organization. The questions are derived from accepted industry security standards, and then the questions are completed through a CSET system. It'll pop up those questions, and at the end, a dashboard of charts showing areas of strength and weaknesses will be displayed, and it also prioritizes the recommendations to increase the site's security posture. It also includes solutions, common practices, compensation actions, and component enhancements or additions. So it really takes the standards, and based on how the questions are answered, it provides some guidance. It not only uses the standards and the questions, and I'll mention this in a minute, but it also uses network diagrams if you have that, if you have those available. So the CSET supports the capabilities and compares multiple assessments established at a baseline. So in other words, if you've done this, if you've used the CSET tool in the past, you can load that past assessment, and then it'll compare it with the new assessment. So the assessment process is that first you select the standards, and that can be one or multiple standards, and it will generate questions from those standards. Then you determine the assurance level, and then it puts out weighted answers based on what level of security you want to have for this particular assessment and for your organization. Then you can create a diagram if you don't have a diagram, or you can skip that section. But if you have a diagram of your network or your enterprise network, whatever it might be, it also generates additional questions. And then in your team of subject matter experts, they answer the questions, and then you get a gap analysis, and then you analyze the results, and it provides all types of charts and reports, and even detailed project activities that you may need to do to close the gaps based on what your management approves. So the first section in selecting, the user select one or more government or industry recognized cybersecurity standards, and then it'll generate questions that are specific to those requirements. So examples would be like the DHS catalog of control system security, the NERC critical infrastructure protection, the NIST 800 to 82, the 853, the critical infrastructure framework, and the CMC version 2 is also in there, just so and I'll show that in the demo. So there's a lot of opportunities and different standards that you can follow. And then the second part of that is to determine the assurance level. So they call it the security assurance level at the SAL, and that determines the number of questions to be answered. So if And if you're looking at this in a real world, it's going to generate a lot because you're going to be working with a company that, and it's going to, you have the time, which normally in my experience, working with other companies, mainly control system and SCADA companies, 2 months is about the norm for how long it takes to get through this process. That's not going to happen in a class, of course. So, for example, if you have a typical high SAL, it will generate anywhere from 350 to 1,000 questions. So you can see this takes a while to go through those. And then if you have a low SAL, it's 30 to 350. So what I'll talk about how I do this in the class at the demo, but we try to cut it down to everything is low, of course. And if you'll notice, the SLAs are off the CIA triad. So that's what they're looking at is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So the third thing is to create the diagram, and this is just an example. This is one we use in our disaster recovery business continuity training class, and they have a medical facility that they start with at the very beginning of the class, and they go through all of that. Part of that is looking at the diagram at this at their business and developing business continuity and disaster recovery, but they also have to do a risk assessment, and we do that. We use the tool for that. So the CSET contains this graphical user interface. It actually has, and I'll show this later, but it has all these different areas. So if it's medical, it'll let you, like, here's the X-ray machine or whatever, and you can, it'll help generate the icons for that, and then you can set up your system. If you'll notice on this one, I'm just going to bring it out now, but I probably show it in the demo, but there's no firewall between the internet and the router and whatnot. So actually the tool will flag those type of things, saying, well, you should consider putting a firewall in there because you have that's a high risk. So that's just kind of what it's one of the values of having the diagram. You can actually import a Visio diagram, although lately for some reason with the latest version, I've been having problems with that, but hopefully they're going to get that resolved. And users are also able to define cybersecurity zones, so you can actually set up, and I'll show you that in the pipe in one of the one with a pipeline where they have it. The SCADA systems are zoned out against the other part through the enterprise network. So that's kind of a quick overview of that section on diagrams. On the fourth, you answer the questions. So the CSET generates questions using the network topology and the standards and the SAL as a basis. And then the assessment team can select the best answers to each question using their organization's actual network configuration and implemented security policies and procedures. So then notes can be entered or files attached. So actually, as you go through the tool, you can actually upload your evidence to show that you're meeting that particular criteria. So again, the assessment's only as good as the truth of the subject matter experts and what they can show as criteria and proof that this is being done. Each question has associated reference information that is provided for clarification. So if you're using like the 853 and it has a certain section in there, like on access control, you could, if you don't understand exactly what all the requirements are, you can click on that and it'll bring up what it means for that particular question. The system also displays the underlying requirements of any supplemental text and any additional resources to help address the problems identified. So then you also, the fifth step there in the process of reviewing
related to building facilities, because
somebody needs to mute that. You're not muted. Thank you. Review and analyze the reports. So this provides a dashboard, so you have a quick overview of the questions that related to that are high in criticality to be resolved. It also shows the number of questions that were addressed and the areas they were addressed. And then the users can easily filter through and drill down to granular information about each one of those areas that there's an issue in. It also provides the top areas of concern, like I mentioned, and then it will provide even an executive summary and even project schedules. If you not in a project management schedule, but more like a task. Here's the task you need to do to resolve these particular critical issues. And then preparing for the assessment. So you get the most out of the CSET assessment by having a cross-functional team in many areas of the organization. So normally you would have several subject matter experts. So like in my experience working, actually using the CSET tool and facilitating, and that's basically what this is. You as a facilitator, if you're using this tool, kind of like if you're familiar with SAP applications, it's a similar type process. And so the US CERTS recommends that you have a good cross-functional team. In some cases, you may combine those members of those teams. In other cases, you may have separate meetings with different subject matter experts. Like, for example, the IT department may answer questions from one part of the organization around the IT sections, but then you may have the engineers or the SCADA system people answering them, maybe separate meetings, or they could be combined. And then the management and supervisors could be included in those. So it's a wide variety of people. So just be aware that this tool is for a team activity, not an individual. So it adequately prepare for the CSET self-assessment, you have to have policies and procedures, the network topology diagrams, the inventory list of critical assets and components, previous risk assessments if you have those, IT and ICS network policies and practices, and the organizational roles and responsibilities. One of the things also that from the business perspective on this, the CSET tool will ask questions that relate back to the business, and that's why we use it in our business continuity class, about the cost of certain things, the impact to the environment, the impact to the community, those kind of things. So you need to have the right people involved in these if you're really doing a CSET tool with an organization, with a company. So to get started, right now it's version 11.5. You can go to the CISA website and you can Google that CSET tool and it'll bring you there, and you can download and install the CSET tool. It'll ask several questions, but it's that just you can it'll ask you what region you're in, and I think those regions are set by FEMA, so it's like the FEMA regions and stuff. I'm not going to go through that because I don't want to take away from the demo. So, but anyway, you can go to these sites. You can also go to GitHub. So if you, I sometimes use the GitHub because if you have a class and all of a sudden they update the version of CSET, that can disrupt your class quite a bit. So sometimes you may have to say, okay, go to the GitHub and take this version of the system. So all the old versions are in the GitHub, and the latest version is always on the CISA website. So as I mentioned, you have two options: the local and the enterprise. I've never done the enterprise myself, but some of the companies that I've worked with they have the enterprise, but it has to get authorization to do that. So from an academic perspective, we just use the desktop and have the students download that. This is basically the PC platform system requirements. You'll have access to this PowerPoint, so you can take a look at all this stuff, but it's also out on the website when you go to CISA. It does not support the Mac, so you can, I guess you can put a virtual system on the Mac, and some of our students have done that, but we emphasize in our courses that we're not going to be supporting the Mac for this particular project. So to demo this thing, I'm going to go to the demo right now, and then I'm going to come back and pick up any questions and answers from the spreadsheet. But so let me see, I guess I have to. Okay, can you all see the tool? Yeah, I think so. Okay,
We can see it.
good. Let me see if I can get some of this maneuver around all of the windows and stuff that. Okay, so this is normally when you come up, you'll come up in the this. It'll bring you up in this screen, which is my assessments. So you can see we have I have quite a few assessments, and because I went in there and went to the new assessments, it has that in there, so I can always remove it. So anyway, but I wanted to go to the new assessments first because this really is important that it shows you all the capabilities, all the different standards and frameworks and practices that you could have with the CSET tool. So let me see here. Get up to the beginning. So it has some popular assessments. So like the CISA cross-reference cybersecurity performance goals, ransomware readiness, the NIST CSF framework version 1, and then the network diagram component. So this is one where it helps you set up and use different types of diagrams. And then this is fairly new stuff in the latest version. And then the CISA sponsored reliance and maturity. So you have the cyber infrastructure survey, the cyber resilience review. I'm not familiar with all these. Some of you all might be. The CISA external dependencies management, the CISA ransomware readiness assessment. So then maturity models. So I am familiar with the CMC. They have a draft, and then they scorecard type, and then they have the capability maturity model, and then the version 1.0. So they cover all of those. And then the energy and electrical, you can see, and there's several on that. I'm not going to go through every one of those, but some of those are standard requirements for that may be required by the industry. And then industry and utilities. So there's different industry things. Somebody needs to mute. Thank you. And then going down to municipal health and care services, the NIST special publications. So this is where you get into the different 853 and whatnot. You can see different versions of that of 853. So we use this quite a bit in our assessment. So I didn't want to do that. Okay, let me go back. And then there's financial CSET standards, Center for Internet Security assessments, process control for SCADA. So I've used quite a few of these, but mainly critical infrastructure framework is what's mostly used with the experience I've had with the different companies that I've worked that are mainly SCADA. And then the transportation, and then other. So they have some other that does some key questions to reduce the subset. So you can do if you're just starting on a risk assessment or for a company, you can maybe use the key questions, and it reduces the number of questions that are asked. And then the DODI and the CNSSI. So those are just examples. So let me go back to my assessment. So what I've done, so I have several assessments here. one of the things that we're my class is the one we use, Dr. No assessment. That's the company that we use, and I'll go through that in just a second because we use the diagrams. We also we help do some assessments in our internship programs. So with like the New Mexico Public School IT department, we also have wind farms in the county. There's 4 wind farms, and so some SCADA assessments on those. Then just some of these are just some of the practice ones I've been working with to try to see how we're going to incorporate some of these into other courses and training. And we're actually doing this across disciplines. So we're working with our CTE department, because they have a lot of requirements for this type of stuff in the CTE area. For their wind farm, for example. That's probably one of the key ones that we've been doing. So anyway, that gives you some ideas. There's just so much there. So when you, I guess I'm going to go ahead and, yeah, let's just go ahead and use the one that I've set up. So usually when you start your assessment, you have to do the assessment configuration and just ask, this is what our students have to do. So, and they work in a team environment. So they have to set up their assessment name, and you can see we've been doing this since 2013. And so they set that up, and then it'll default based on whatever your, as far as this username and all that stuff. Then you can identify the sector. So there's all different types of sectors, as you can see, that are the critical infrastructure sectors. The industry itself, so we said direct patient care, but you can, based off what we said in healthcare, then it has options that you can use. And if you don't have it listed there, you can just put other. And then what is the gross value of the assets you're trying to protect? So you can put down that that amount, and then what is the relative expected effort for this assessment. So this is really unrealistic, but anyway, we put down for like 1 to 2 hours to keep, so the students won't get discouraged. It takes more than that, but we don't tell them until they get into it. Sorry. And then the name of the organization, the business agency, industry, again, or the organizational type. So you can put down industry, federal, tribal, whatever. And then the facilitator. So this one, it defaults to yours. So usually that person's the facilitator, the critical service, and then the critical service point of contact, which we don't have that in there. So then we look at the security levels, and this one, on this example, I think I've tweaked this just for the when I was working with the for the CSET, and I never did get to do it. But anyway, this I put down that it had a moderate for confidentiality, a high for integrity, and availability was moderate. And then it also gives you the NIST 600, or you can do a simple assessment. You can do a general risk-based assessment. And so that's it. As you change these, it provides different assessment questions that it's going to come up with. So if I do a general risk-based, for example, it will come up with questions like injuries. If control systems are maliciously accessed or manipulated, it asks for how many people could sustain injuries. So this is very important in these control systems where they're like maybe a chemical plant or a pipeline, gas pipeline or something like that. So, or any type of SCADA system that could cause those things, issues to the employees, to the community. So as you can see, it generates these different types of questions. And then, so let me see if I can. So these are like all the different questions it's trying to generate, just off of those type of off of the general. The simple would be looking more against confidentiality. So we usually in there, we always go low, 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 and then the simple. And so that will look at confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Then we also use the network diagram. And so the network diagram will generate several questions, but I'll just show you the diagram. I think I showed you that before. So here's the diagram. And if you look, you can actually create your own diagrams. So here's an ICS icon. So there's different types of for the ICS servers and whatnot, and then routers, all that would come in an IT. Here's more IT. This is really the main IT items, and then the radio. So different types of radio communications. Again, we use the medical. There's lots of medical things that you can tie into there, and then just general shapes and zones. Again, you can actually use Visio. Hopefully they'll get that working. If you're using Visio, you can do a file, and then you can import from, and then it'll bring in that file based on what you want. So then once you have your diagram set up, it generates these questions. So if you look at it, it's going to actually look at here's all the equipment that was in there, and then it'll generate the questions. So here's the diagram component questions. So for access control, it has a set of questions. So you have to answer those questions. So it says, are application developers only given rights needed to develop applications and not full administrator? So again, it just depends on the standards and whatnot you set up, and then the diagram. And it goes into configuration management, communication protection, firewall components. Let's see. There wasn't a firewall in there, so we didn't have the firewall. So that's why it was blank on this particular thing. And then management component defaults. So you kind of get the idea. It generates quite a few questions for this. So like if you were looking at monitoring malware, so it asked, are host-based intrusion detections used to alert administrators? So what basically we have a set number. We say yes and no, just so we can get something generated. And so this is like the component summary, and it shows the number of questions that were answered. There was 226 total questions, 130 were unanswered, and then one was not applicable. The ones we answered were 54 yes and 51 no. So the ones that are no may have generated a ranked category. So management practices have some issues. So some of the management practices, it failed 30 out of the 40 that were in there. So anyway, it helps guide you along. And then this is the component results by category. So for access control, it's showing you the percentage that you do have something in place for those. Some of those you don't have anything. You'll notice the firewall has nothing, so that could be an issue. And actually, it should flag that in the network area. And I don't see it right now, but and then here's the answer by component type. So again, this shows, and so if there's a no there, it's going to generate, and it's a part of the standard, it's going to generate. So here's the warning. So the path identified by the components Internet 1 and Router 1 appears to connect on one side of an external network, a firewall to filter the. So it does see, it does give you some analysis of your network and tells you whether there's some exposures. So and then here's your as a high-level assessment description, an executive summary, and then any comments that you can put in there. Then you can actually look at the, these are observational test out sheets. So you can actually develop these punch lists, you might say, to go and assign those to different organizations. Probably you're not going to do that until you get the money, and that means you have to have an executive summary. It kind of goes over, most likely you'll have to modify this in a real world, but it kind of goes over what you did as far as the standard, kind of what the analysis looked like, but it doesn't give you any cost analysis, which is, if you're going to management, executive management, they're always wanting to know what it's going to cost. So, and then there's a site report that kind of shows by the different sites. So this was for Dr. No. There's the executive summary, gives you the diagrams, findings and recommendations. So right off the bat, that network warning was one of the top things that it identified. So I think the way we answered these questions, we didn't get much more out of it than that. So, but so that kind of gives you an idea of how the system works. And let me go back. You were looking at, so I haven't done, see, I haven't done much on this ransomware, but there is this one on ransomware that you can, since that's something a lot of people have an interest in. So if you have a course and you're teaching ransomware, maybe you could go, it has a lot of good information about the ransomware readiness goals and practices. It has a lot of information on tools that can be used. And then, so here's the ransomware readiness assessment. So it talks about backups, and maybe they could have used this ransomware readiness for Explorer pipeline. But anyway, you can. So this really fits nicely too, as far as, and I've kind of quickly gone through this, but it has, it could be used in a disaster recovery business continuity, because you're talking about robust backups. That's pretty important in business continuity, disaster recovery, web management. So you can see it's kind of a quick IDs of what's there. So stop sharing that and let me see. Okay, any questions? Looks like there's a lot of stuff in the chat, so probably there is. Okay, let me see here.
Yeah, Mr. Miller, this is Dr. Martin from Capital Technology University. Appreciate your presentation. I'm looking for, because I teach CSET in one of our upper level courses.
Okay.
And I'm looking for practical exercises. And it looks like you've got a rich group of those, because what I'm trying to do is to give the students something to look at, and then they do a reassessment of what I give them. So they don't have to go from scratch. So individually, they'll have to update it, and I'll give them some parameters. So I don't know if you had any things that that I could use in that regard will kind of enhance my class. We've been doing it for about 2 or 3 years now, and I've been using CSET since 14. So you got me by a year. So it's a very good tool for that. So I don't know if you have that available. I could put my email in the chat. We can go offline and talk about it if you need
Sure.
to.
And I'm actually have some of, we're going to work with the Clark Center. I actually have the risk assessment business continuity course out there. I don't know if they've got it out there right now, but I just finished the final reviews with them. But we also are thinking about putting some of the CSET scenarios out there. So like the one we use with the wind farms and the one with New Mexico public schools, but kind of a generic view. But and what you're doing there is pretty, it's a good way to do it as well, is because as you can say, you can have a previous assessment, and that's a good way to do it. Bring that previous assessment in and ask them to do a new assessment based off of the previous one, and maybe fix something that was in. If you're
Right.
doing
See,
the
what
diagram.
happens is that because of the limitation of time, as you know,
Yeah,
for them to do a full assessment, it'll probably take them a couple of semesters if they really do it by themselves. So what I do is I say, okay, here's an assessment. I did one using an heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system, for instance.
that's good.
And I says, okay, there's been some changes. Tell me what changes could be used, and then give me a report. And sometimes that takes on a life of its own. So I was just saying, I was just seeing if there was something else, and I'm trying to integrate the CCR, which is the cybersecurity readiness feature, because a lot of the students have heard of it in the EDR, the external dependencies. So I'm working on those right now. So I mean, I'm just saying that that's something. So anything that you can provide will help, and I'm willing to share whatever I have with the group here.
Sure, that would be great. I can also say that maybe you can also reach out to the Idaho labs. They have some scenarios that they could provide.
Yeah, well,
you
they
as
won't
well.
answer. They won't answer their mail, so I gotta
Okay,
I gotta
okay.
beat them up. I gotta go up to the higher level.
Send me your email, and I actually have pretty good connections with the Idaho labs, so I can get you someone to respond.
Yeah, so that's the only thing, and I think it's a tool that's the best kept secret in the federal government that doesn't cost anything.
I know.
You know, so I'm just saying that it will behoove all, and we've got people from all over the world using this.
Yes.
In fact, we do have a couple of students from Nigeria on the call right now. So I'm just saying is that we
Good.
do have a very rich usage of the tool, and a lot of people still don't know about it. Okay, so appreciate it. Thank you,
Okay.
and I'll be
Oh,
looking forward to getting the information.
oh,
And I put my email in the chat. It's rlmartin1@captechu.edu.
okay.
It's in the chat. Okay.
Yeah, I see it. Great.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Any other questions? I may not. There's a lot of information in the chat, but if you just go ahead and unmute and ask me, that would be the best way to do it.
Hi, Dr. Miller. This is Ankur here from Northern Kentucky University. First of all, thank you for your presentation. I think following up on what Ron just mentioned, I would be interested if you could share any experiences in addition to any materials, scenarios or lessons by which, I teach risk management at both undergraduate and graduate levels. So I think this is probably a tool that I can use in my class to do like risk assessment related exercises. So if you could share any experiences that you might have had or you know of how to integrate this, or for the matter, any materials that you can share. Thank you.
Yeah, and one thing that we actually worked with the New Mexico Public Schools, New Mexico Tech, and our community college students, and we have an internship program. So this works really well for interns. So what we do is we have a contract with the state and the public schools, their IT department, and there's about 56 different school districts in New Mexico. So and they have a broadband that they're connected to, so they have to meet the requirements for that. So what we do and it's all coordinated through New Mexico Tech. So they have their graduate students, one of their professors are the lead, and then and of course you have to have an ADA and all that, but NDA, but they have that, and then they work with the undergraduate students both at their university and our community college, and so this gives them some real practical experiences. It's been a real challenge because everything we have is online, not New Mexico Tech, but everything we have at our community college. So we had to devise a way how the students can participate online, as well as the actual team that goes out to the sites and performs the audits with the risk assessment. So I can share that stuff later offline, but that's a good way to look at it, is trying to implement it into an internship program as well. NCyTE sponsored something called the Career Challenge, and in the Career Challenge, there's a set of teams that are made up of 3 to 4 students, and it's kind of like a capstone in a way. So they are given a virtual environment, and they have to come up with a company, and then they have to configure the network, the virtual network for that company, including developing the website for their business and the products they're selling and all that stuff. So they have to have a business plan and whatnot. It's basically a 10-week, 160-hour minimum worth of effort. To configure all this up, they have to do a risk assessment using the CSET tool to determine if they've met if they have a secure system, and when they set everything up, and then to make the adjustments. They also on week 9, they have a group out of Cal State San Bernardino that does penetration testing. So they go in and attack these systems. At the same time, they have another set of students that are acting as customers. So they come in and trying to buy products. You have to have a help desk set up following the ITEL practices. And so you'll have people complaining about products at the same time you're getting attacked. So it's kind of a real world environment, but the risk assessment is really important in how they actually can pretty much close the gaps before they get attacked. So anyway, that's you keep an eye out, because and Mike Singletary can maybe talk more about it later on, but we will have probably offer another career challenge in the spring or something. I don't know, it's spring or fall, but I guess it was in the spring we did it. Anyway, let's see.
Thank you for that information. I appreciate
Sure.
it. I might reach out to you through email, like you said, offline. Yep,
Okay,
sure.
that'll be great.
Thank you.
So I don't know if I don't see any other questions. Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
One question I have not seen or heard of any work group or entity that studies or try to look at CSET. Would the center be interested in establishing one so that we can actually bring this out? Because many of our students, when they graduate, when they go to their positions, mostly in those little 3-letter agencies around Washington, D.C., they said we're one of the few schools that teach how to do an assessment, because many of the schools don't teach the students. They said, well, I do cybersecurity, but then they don't know how to operate it. So I was wondering if maybe the center, and maybe you can't answer it or someone can answer it, I'll be more than willing to kind of participate in something like that, so that we can, for the greater good of using the tool, we can kind of collaborate to make sure that we're getting the best out of the tool. So I don't know if that's something that you could organize for.
Yeah, we can definitely look at that, because critical infrastructure is one of the areas we've provided some curriculum around critical infrastructure. Margaret Leary has done some work there. I worked with her initially on that. We actually, George Mason University did the first work in their
Hey,
yeah, there you go. So yeah, that's right.
Go Patriots.
So we actually took their master's program and kind of made it more toward our community colleges, but it all works. So yeah, I definitely, let's talk about this offline. I'll bring it up in our leadership team meetings.
Yeah, please do,
see
because I think it'd be very important. I'm a professor of practice for critical infrastructure at Capital Technology University. So this is something that's in our wheelhouse here.
So Bill Butler.
Oh yeah, Bill. Yeah, that's my boss. Well, my supervisor. I guess, if one can be supervised, yeah. Dr. Butler.
He would be a good person to work for, I think.
Yeah, he is. He's a great guy. Great guy. And I would just say, and just so we don't take up too much of the space, but the bottom line is that critical infrastructure nowadays, having an understanding and an appreciation of it, a lot of people, we have a doctoral program in critical infrastructure at Capital. So, so we go from, I even have high school students undergrad, grad, and doctoral students in critical infrastructure. So we're taking it all in.
It's a very important, and these many companies are looking for that expertise. I'm retired from ExxonMobil. This is what drove me to the CSET tool in the first place, because we had
Right.
similar processes, but they weren't as automated as the CSET tool. So it's a very good facilitator.
Right. So if we can have a work group or something like that, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm in a whole bunch of work groups, but this would be a very important one for the educational aspects of this tool and the assessment process. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you. All right, Mike, I'm going to turn it back to you.
I had a
Everybody
quick
for-
question.
Oh, yeah,
If
go
it's
ahead.
okay. Hey, Stevens, Brett Lundstrom, Cybersecurity
Hi.
Center of Excellence for Washington. I really appreciated your presentation. I had this idea of developing this model for an internship as a service, where students could essentially use the CSET tool to go out to either small or medium-sized businesses, or some of our utilities in the state, to potentially start this assessment on their security posture. And I'm just curious, what you see as some of the limitations that you might run into with local municipalities and utilities that could prevent that project from potentially being a success.
So when we started the pilot with the New Mexico Public Schools, we thought, we would be able to move pretty quickly. It took over a year to get the lawyers from everybody agreeing on what was what kind of exposure they were that each organization was willing to take. So that's one of the biggest issues. Is the university, is the community college, are they liable if you do a risk assessment and it gives the wrong information or whatnot? So, which I haven't ever seen that, but part of that was that we just didn't do a risk assessment. So in our project, we actually have an audit. So they have a tool that they use to go in and verify that these things have been completed, that after the risk assessment has been done. And that's where you can get into some issues, especially if you're looking at control systems. You take down a refinery, you have cost that company a lot of money. So are you going to be liable for that? Now, that's bigger companies. So small companies, if you take their business down for some reason, or you give them wrong information, are you liable for that? If they fixed it the way you ask them to fix it and it still get a tax, and that you can't say that you're 100% secure on anything. So those are the exposures that we had to go. That was probably the biggest issue, working with the lawyers to make sure that everybody understands the roles, responsibilities, and their liability that they may have. So we did work with insurance companies. We were doing this on some local businesses as well, and some of these were I think some DoD companies, but the insurance companies have a big interest in this. So that's one way to sell this. It helps reduce the cost of if you've done a risk assessment, and CSET is a good tool for that to help implement that. So I don't know if that answered the question, but probably the biggest thing is getting the lawyers together and getting that resolved with all the different. So when you have your model and your business set up, that's just doing business anywhere. You have to get those agreements and get a service level agreement in place. That service level agreement in the contract determines what kind of liability you may have. So, for example, all of our students had to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and we had to. All the faculty that were participating had to sign it, and then we even had, we had to get a sign off from our president. So it takes a while to get it in place, but once you have it in place, then it works really well, I think.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Mike, I'll let you go. I'm over a little bit.
Thanks again, everybody, for attending. I just want to bring to your attention, we have the virtual cybersecurity career fair coming up at the end of next month. This is a great opportunity for your students to network with other industry employers who are looking for industry, government, education. They will all be there. So I think last year we had over 400 institutions, and what does it say on there? I think we had over 50 or 60 employers. So it's a great opportunity for students to get a sense of what employers are looking for, hone their resume, and work on some interview skills. So they'll have opportunities to talk to the employers in person, well, virtually, but synchronously live. And then the last thing is, and I sent a link out there, is please give us your feedback on today's membership meeting, and let us know what topics you might be interested in the future. Again, thank you for attending, and hopefully we'll see you again next month. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.